So, good evening. Welcome to the French Embassy. My name is Bénédicte de Montlore, and I'm the cultural counselor here. And I'm delighted that you are all here for this great panel. So, maybe some of you are not familiar with us. So 3 years ago, we opened this bookstore, Albertine Books. And our idea was not only to sell books, but also to have this place for intellectual exchange between France and America. So we organize events all year long, but with this special moment, the festival. So every year, we are trying to choose a theme that matters. Last year, we did racism with, as a curator, Ta-Nehisi Coates. And this year, we thought it was particularly timely and appropriate to deal with feminism. France and America have a shared history of feminism. We've produced some of the best intellectuals, just to mention, of course, Simone de Beauvoir and Betty Friedan. And we thought it was the right moment to bring the voices that count today in both our country to explore, the cross-influences between our two countries, and also to see around different themes how they play out differently in France and America, and how we can learn from each other and also invent new answers for today's world. So tonight is a panel on media. And with Gloria and Robin really insisting on having a panel on media, because this is key. We all know that we can gather, we can have political action, but the important thing is to know how to be visible in the media, how to make ourselves there, to bring our voice to the conversation. So thank you very much to all our panelists. They were very carefully chosen by Gloria Steinem and us at the embassy so that we can have the best conversation. So I want to thank Lauren Wolfe, who is going to be the moderator for tonight's panel. So Lauren Wolfe is an award-winning journalist and photographer who has written for publication from The Atlantic to the New York Times. She is currently a columnist at Foreign Policy magazine and the director of Women Under Siege, a journalism project on sexualized violence in conflict originated by Gloria Steinem at Women's Media Center in New York. So thank you. Welcome, Lauren. And I will leave the floor to you so that you can introduce our panelists. I also wanted to say that we will have a book signing by Laure Adler at the end of the panel, because she's the one who's written some books. So there will be this book signing after. Yeah, now my mic.
Hello, everyone. I'm glad you're all here. I'm very excited about tonight's panel. I'm sad that one panelist wasn't able to join us, Soraya Chemaly, who is really a leader in the field of tackling online harassment against women. But she had an illness in her family. So I'm thrilled to be here with these wonderful women, leaders in their field. And I just wanted to read you a little bit about what we'll be sort of talking about tonight before I introduce them. So some of this comes from Gloria, some of this is my revision. As feminists say, you need to see it to be it. But as more people are exposed to more media than ever before, it remains true that women are underrepresented in the press. The media shapes our understanding through representations of society, of women in particular, and issues such as false equivalency, cyberbullying, or trolling that suppress ideas and groups. We'll discuss how to make an individual, group, fact, idea, or chosen identity visible in today's media landscape. And in light of the ever-growing conversation about men sexually harassing women across industries, including in journalism, we'll talk about what we can do to make this male-dominated field safer and more equitable for women. So now just to introduce the panelists, I'll start to my left. This is Elaine Weltheroth. She is the editor-in-chief of Teen Vogue and has been credited with reinventing the magazine as the go-to source for socially conscious young people and increasing the brand's emphasis on diversity, feminism, and cross-generational conversations alongside fashion and entertainment news. Weltheroth first joined Teen Vogue in 2012 as the beauty and health director, and most recently served as Teen Vogue's editor. To her left is Nassira Moaddem. She is a journalist and one of the few female editors-in-chief of a French media outlet. She began her career as a reporter and news anchor at Italie Canal Plus before joining France 2. In 2016, she took the helm of the Bondi blog, a news website that gives voices to the voiceless, especially those living on the outskirts of cities. And at the end, we have Laure Adler, and she is a journalist and author of more than 25 written works. She is a publisher and radio and TV producer. She served as cultural advisor to French President François Mitterrand. She teaches at Sciences Po Paris about women and feminism, and published most recently Françoise Mitterrand, Le Roman de Salvé. Excuse me, I barely speak French. So just to start off, I'd like to start with sort of a broad question for our panelists, and I guess I'll just start from left and answer as you please. But please also, I'd like them each to sort of tell a little bit more about themselves, because those were kind of short bios. So the first question I just want to ask is, you're all very much at the top of your field in different areas. And what has it been like to get to the top of the media profession as a woman? What have been some of the challenges along the way?
Well, I don't know another way. I don't know what it's like to be a man. So what I will say, in my case, young Black woman, trifecta of sorts, is that I realized embracing what makes me different is the thing that set me apart and put me on a fast track to success. But it took me a long time to realize that. I think that as women of color, there is this tendency to assimilate to the culture around you. So if it's male-dominated or predominantly white, it could change the way you speak, what ideas you choose to share, how you represent yourself, and I think the beauty of working at Teen Vogue, which is a young brand with a focus and emphasis on celebrating diversity, I feel like I kind of found my home base where I could really just figure out how to be myself and bring my full self to work. But even still, there was a lot of sort of like unconditioning that I needed to do. I think that in our world, the role model for power, for what power looks like, is a very patriarchal model. And for women, we have to rewrite the rules of what our own power playbook should be. And I think as a young female leader, without a lot of examples of that around me, I had to rewrite it. I had to rewrite what that would look like and own it, and not feel like it was invalid because it wasn't, because it was different from the model of power that I've seen before. So I found that leading with empathy, leading with grace, leading collaboratively were not weaknesses, but rather strengths that actually fostered a sense of intellectual safety on our team, a sense of community where people could feel that they belonged in that room. And what I realize is when you embrace what makes you different, especially as the leader, it gives permission to everyone in the room to embrace and celebrate what makes them different. And then it's sort of like all the masks come off, and that's power. That's power, and especially in a creative field, I think it's necessary for the masks to come off in order for your best work to be done. And I think that has a lot to do with how we've been able to realize this new mission at Teen Vogue and really activate in a big, powerful way in the world.
I think that's just brilliant. What a wonderful answer. I just quickly wanted to ask, do we have journalists in the room? Can you just show your hands? Little hands.
Put your hands up high.
Come on.
Why are people, they're like this?
I know. But it's all women I'm seeing raising their hands, really. Anyway, I just know personally, in the way you're describing it, I didn't grow up with female role models pretty much anywhere. You know, I knew who Gloria Steinem was from television, but, you know, I now work for her, so that's a little bit crazy to have sort of my first female role model be Gloria, which is wonderful. But in journalism, you know, there's a certain culture in newsrooms that you're talking about. You have to unlearn it. And it's like, you know, to be honest, heavy drinking, cursing, and like making fun of everything that's vulnerable, you know? And it really is, right? Like some people are laughing, maybe you understand. But it really is strength to recreate that model, and I do think it's part of your magazine's success. So please, Nassira, do you want to answer the same question?
Yeah, that's interesting because we are from different countries, and I totally share what she said. But I think that the main word that accompanied my trajectory since I became a journalist is work, and always work, and maybe work more than the others. And I think this is the story shared by all children of immigrants. My parents are from Morocco, so they came in France in the 70s, in 75 exactly. And my father was a worker. He was working in a car factory, and my mother did not work at that time. And you know, when you are a child of immigrants, French in France, I mean, you have always your parents saying, "Okay, so just work, make them, I mean, be brilliant, be excellent, not like." Just 18 or 19, 20. You have to have 20 at your scores in your scholarship. So yeah, I think that the main thing was having all this speech about work, and it's not about only school, primary school or high school. It's just the same till the university and till now. You just want to be the most brilliant, to have the most brilliant stories, the most brilliant reports, inquiries, and so on, investigates. So this is the main word. It's work. What was interesting when I just took the responsibilities at the head of the Bondi blog, because before, as you said, I was a TV reporter, but in 2016, when I took the head of the Bondi blog, the comments and the reactions of some journalists were very, very interesting. Because some of the journalists who came to me because they wanted to make a story about it, they said to me, "Oh, this is impressive. This is very, very impressive. How a woman can become the head of the Bondi blog in this, I mean, like a media in the suburbs." It was for them. It was like impossible to happen, and for me, I did not really realize what did that mean at that time, because for me it was really natural, and for the Bondi blog, the media that I had, it was completely natural. I mean, the main people who are writing in the Bondi blog, they are girls. Actually, they are women, and I think in the newsrooms, the majority are women too today in France. And even in the schools of journalism, the majority are women, and also in universities. So for me, it was like, and for the Bondi blog, it was really, really natural that a woman just took the responsibility, because it's like a demography explanation. So, and what was interesting is that these people, these journalists who made these comments, they never really asked themselves about why in their own newsrooms women are not the editors-in-chiefs. They don't really realize it, and they don't really ask themselves about it. So it was really interesting for me. And then they realized that, okay, maybe they did not really understand what was the Bondi blog and what was our specificity.
Can I ask you to describe for the audience what you cover in the Bondi blog, because Americans may not be familiar?
Yeah. So just maybe to say a few words about the creation of the Bondi blog. It was created in 2005, and I think you remember at that time there's some riots that rose up in France because two teenagers, they were playing football in Clichy-sous-Bois, which is a city near Paris, like 40 kilometers far away from Paris in the north. And they were playing football, and they saw policemen, and when they saw the police, they just ran away, because I think it's the same thing here in the United States. in a lot of cases when young immigrants, origins, see policemen just afraid and they ran away. So they ran away and they entered into an electric transformator and they died inside. So just after that, some riots just exploded in the suburbs, and the Bondi Bloc was created at that time. The origins was the riots, but above all, the lack of visibility of people who live in the suburbs, the inhabitants of the suburbs. Because until now, I mean, even if we just passed like 12 years since the riots, still there's this problem of visibility and of representation of people who live in the suburbs. So the Bondi Bloc was created at that time, and the aim was to give the possibility to these people to have a media where they can just talk about their concrete daily life. So we are still making this job.
Okay, thank you. And just to repeat the question for Laure and then to translate, just can you describe what it's like to have reached the top of the media profession as a woman, and what kinds of challenges have you faced?
Ben moi, j'ai la chance de faire partie d'une génération qui a commencé à comprendre ce que ça voulait dire être une femme au moment où le féminisme venait de commencer. Donc cet engagement dans le féminisme, j'avais à peine 17 ans, a constitué ma colonne vertébrale, et je suis devenue féministe avant de devenir journaliste. Et je suis rentrée par hasard dans le journalisme, au départ dans un tout petit job, puisque c'était le job qu'on donne aux filles, généralement, c'est-à-dire les plus bas boulots, c'était pour taper à la machine. Et j'ai dit que je savais taper à la machine. Je ne savais pas taper à la machine, mais j'ai demandé aux garçons qui étaient dans le bureau à côté de moi s'ils pouvaient taper à la machine quand le patron était derrière la porte. Et ça a marché. Je suis rentrée donc comme soi-disant sténodactylo, on disait ça à l'époque. Et petit à petit, j'ai monté les échelons. Mais dès que je suis rentrée dans le journalisme, à un moment où il y avait très peu de femmes, j'ai décidé de faire mon travail universitaire sur les femmes journalistes. Parce que je pense que le combat féministe, encore aujourd'hui, il passe par la mémoire collective des femmes qui nous ont précédées, des femmes qui agissent en ce moment même, et des femmes qui sont en train de commencer à inventer des choses pour nous les femmes. Et donc, comme je suis de formation philosophique et historique, j'ai fait une thèse sur l'histoire des premières femmes journalistes en France. Cette histoire est très intéressante et très importante pour nous les femmes en France encore aujourd'hui. Il faut savoir qu'en France, au XIXe siècle... Pardon.
So I was lucky enough to become to be part of a generation, and when I started my profession, I was a feminist before I even became a journalist. I was only 17 years old, and being a feminist was really in the backbone of who I was, and it came well before anything else. I actually started my career at a newspaper with the smallest, with the lowest level job possible, because back then, I was young, I was a woman, they just gave me the little jobs that only a young woman could do. That was the mentality back then. They asked me if I could typewrite, and I said I could, which wasn't true at all. So I did what one would do back then, and I asked some young boy that was in the office next door if he could actually do the typing when the boss wasn't around. And he did, and it worked out. And so that was my title. I was responsible for being a stenographer and a typist. And little by little, I climbed the ladder of the company, and I did become a journalist eventually. But I was also going to university, and And I started, really understanding what being a feminist was. And because I wanted to do my university job, my university work in this direction, I decided that I wanted to write my thesis on that. And I thought it was fundamental to collect the memory of what feminist women had done, because there were so many women who were working and who in this direction, and who were empowering women, and who were inventing new things that women were doing. So since my majors were history and philosophy, I decided to write my thesis on the history of the first women journalists in France. I think it's a vital history because...
Alors très rapidement... Très rapidement, parce que je pense que c'est un combat d'aujourd'hui et de demain. Au XIXe siècle, les premières femmes journalistes ont été des ouvrières, des révolutionnaires. Pendant la révolution de 1830 et pendant les deux révolutions de 1848, elles ont inventé, à elles toutes seules, un journal qu'elles ont composé, qu'elles ont distribué, qu'elles ont écrit, et qui était un journal de solidarité avec toutes les autres femmes pour défendre leurs droits, devenir des citoyennes et devenir des actrices de l'histoire. Et aujourd'hui, encore, nous en sommes là. Ça passe par la reconnaissance de notre passé, du féminisme, et ça passe aussi par la solidarité que nous pouvons avoir avec les générations d'aujourd'hui et les futures générations. Mais je pense que dans le journalisme, il y a encore beaucoup de combats à mener en France, même si beaucoup de choses, comme vous l'avez dit tout à l'heure, ont changé, mais il y a des femmes qui sont dans les postes les plus importants, qui dirigent. C'est une femme qui dirige France Télévisions. Il y a des femmes à la tête de toutes les grandes radios, mais les chefs sont des hommes. Et pour masquer le fait qu'il y a très peu de femmes qui ont des responsabilités, on met des femmes tout en haut, mais on met très peu de femmes qui dirigent réellement. Donc, je pense que le combat ne fait que commencer. Non. Oui, sauf au Bondi Blog, mais Bondi Blog, c'est un média révolutionnaire depuis le début. N'est-ce pas?
So I think that this fight is very important today, just like it was in the 19th century when these first women journalists started to write. The first women journalists in France were actually factory workers, and in the revolutions in 1869 and c'était quand la date des révolutions?
1848 et 1830.
And in 1830 and in 1848, they actually invented the first papers. It was papers that they would write, compose, distribute, and promote. And the ideas that they were sharing through these newspapers were based on solidarity among women. It was based on defending women's rights, and it was based on supporting each other. And this is still the same spirit. I think it's fundamental for us to acknowledge and recognize the work that all these women did in the past and express this kind of solidarity with the generations that are working today and for future generations. But there's still a lot to be done in terms of promoting this kind of collaboration in France. Even though a lot has been done, as my colleague just mentioned earlier, well, there is a strange situation whereby, for example, the head of France Television is a woman, and there's women as heads in radio stations, important ones. However, the head of departments tend to be men. So the idea is that in order to cover up, to mask the fact that women don't actually have that much power, what has been done is that women are put in leadership positions, given their really high roles, but then the actual on-the-field power is still maintained by men. And then the colleague said that in her publication, it's not like that. And Laure explained that Ben Block was always a revolutionary kind of news outlet since the beginning, and it still is.
Thank you. just because we don't have as much time as I would like, I'm going to ask a few more questions and keep talking, but I'm not going to ask you all to answer, so just jump in if you want to answer a particular question. So speaking of, I thought it was very interesting in the introduction to this panel, talking about the differences between US and French media and where women stand in both countries and these kind of leadership positions. I just wanted to give you a couple statistics. The Women's Media Center does an annual study of women in the media. And this year, we found that at 20 of the nation's top news outlets, men produced 62% of news reports. In a century's worth of Pulitzer Prizes, women have only won 14%, and people of color only 16%. So my question would be, what needs to be done to raise women up to these higher positions and actually give them power? Because it's very interesting what you said in France, this situation, to get where you are. And then I'll combine this with another question as well. We know that men are telling these stories much more often than women. They get the bylines, which actually, again, in our study shows that if, say, there's a story about rape and a man writes it, he interviews more men, more male voices enter that story. He interviews the perpetrator, the accused perpetrator, more often than the alleged victim. So we know that men are affecting what we read, you know, how stories are told. So how do we start to change all of this? I mean, it really, you know, it's been so slow, and we keep thinking there's a sea change moment, but, you know, in the 20 years I've worked in journalism, not that much has changed, except for the fact that, like, you work with women, and you have this special women's thing, and I run a special women's project. Those things are changing. So it's kind of just a broad question of, like, how do we get women's voices both into the bylines on television and as voices within the stories?
L'éducation.
Education.
I understood that one.
It's the beginning.
But are you talking about like university, like going to a journalism school, or just how would you?
Non, l'éducation à l'école depuis que les enfants sont petits. Déjà dans les manuels scolaires, ne pas représenter la petite fille comme étant celle qui est plus fragile, celle qui joue à la poupée, le garçon comme celui qui construit, qui n'a jamais peur. Déjà, il faut commencer par ça. Et puis peut-être arrêter les publicités sur les femmes telles qu'on nous les montre partout dans les magazines, y compris les magazines féminins, notamment en France. Je ne sais pas si c'est aussi violent aux États-Unis, mais en France, c'est dément. Et ça ne cesse d'augmenter. Arrêter l'image de la dégradation publique de la femme, qui est une pute sans arrêt pour que les hommes achètent des voitures, de l'alcool, tout le temps, dans l'espace public. Dès que nous sortons dans les rues, nous voyons notre représentation comme des prostituées. Nous sommes des prostituées en puissance, tout le temps, dans le regard public et dans l'espace public.
When I talk about education, I'm talking about training children, starting from school books. We have to stop the situation where in school books, girls are depicted as having dolls and being little fragile things, whereas boys are builders and they're never afraid of anything. We have to start getting rid of that image. And also, we have to stop the way women are portrayed in magazines and in ads, especially in France. I'm not sure whether it's different in the United States, but what happens in France is really outrageous. The degradation of women, well, we're portrayed as prostitutes, as sluts all the time, all over, just to sell cars, to sell alcoholic drinks. You know, as soon as a woman gets out in the street and sees, you know, ads, posters, and magazines, what they're portrayed of is sluts, prostitutes, and that is the public image that we are, you know, included in. Let's stop that.
Can I just add one thing, though? And then even in my particular case, I don't know if any of you have encountered it, I do war reporting and reporting on refugees, and I have had only male journalists question or say to me, but you're not really a journalist, right? You're more of an activist? And I'm always very, I said, well, did you read my last story in The Guardian? What what was not reported in that? I'm very confused because I think it's very hard to conceive of women sometimes in male journalists' heads that we're doing the exact same work as them and sometimes better than them. So yeah, please continue.
And especially for the newsrooms, I think that we have to give the possibility to women to endorse in the syndicates. I don't know how it is in the United States, but it still has a wrong image.
Can you explain the syndicates, because we don't really have that in the US?
Like unions unions which defend the rights of the employees in each company, but especially for the newspapers, it's always really, and I think you will share my point of view, Laure, it's always really bad, as an image, when you are a journalist, even if you are a woman or a man, it's the same. When you are engaged, when you are involved in a movement, and especially a syndicate movement, as in a union, it's really, the image is really bad for you. And the problem is that if you want to be a journalist, but also to be a woman, and to be a mother, and to be a friend, and to have time for all of this, well, you have to defend your rights. And I think there's no better way to defend your right if you have the possibility to do it inside your newsroom, inside your work. And I think in the schools, especially in journalism schools, there's still a lack of information about it. When I was in the journalism school at ESG Lille, for instance, it's a big school in France, I did not have any class, any information about it. And when I entered in a newsroom, I just realized that if I am not in a union, if I'm not defended for my rights as a woman, as a professional inside my company, I cannot really do anything. So I think there was like a subject on it.
Just speaking of education and changing points of view, I went to Columbia Journalism School many, many moons ago, and I will never forget that I had a professor who told our class, which was mostly women, you're never really going to make money in this field. So what you're going to have to do is write a book that becomes a movie or marry rich. Yes, I do.
Well, I think I come from a very different perspective, just working in women's media, and I think I'm fortunate to have, been socialized from my professional life around mostly women, and also I work at a magazine that was first a fashion magazine, first and foremost, and then became a much more political magazine, and I should say a brand, really.
And that was really under you. So at some point I'd love to hear more about why you did that, how you did that.
Yeah, well, I think this isn't exactly an answer to your original question, but I think that just as a young female journalist with multiple interests, I felt restricted in how I was categorized coming up. I remember being in this heated debate with a colleague of mine when I was an intern in the advertising world, and we both were bonding over the fact that we hated advertising and we really wanted to do journalism. And he was from this Tisch school, and then I shared a story that I had published about shoes in a full-figured magazine, and it required research, and it needed to be, copy edited, and it took a lot of time. And he was like, "This is not journalism." And
because it was what is known as like a pink topic,
right. It was
or a soft topic.
Correct. Which most women's interests are often depicted this way. And I thought, and I remember just taking him down. And I thought, ooh, if I care this much about this, I need to do this with my life. Peace out, advertising industry. I'm going right into storytelling. And I did, and by the time I got to Teen Vogue, I just saw there was this huge white space. Like, we were talking to our girl, or our audience, about like this much of what actually affected her life. And I thought, God, we are all intersectional, multifaceted beings. Yes, teen girls too care about more than just lipstick and Bieber, I assure you. And we're not ashamed of liking Bieber and lipstick. Like, don't get me wrong. And we shouldn't be made to feel badly about having an interest in fashion. But I think you can have conversations about Bieber and lipstick as well as Black Lives Matter and a host of other social issues that really matter to our audience because they're living this and they're the ones who are going to change the world, and it's our job to invest in them, to educate them, inform them, and start conversations that matter and host those conversations on our platform, and to hand the mic over to marginalized communities that rarely see their voice represented in mainstream media. And I knew what that was like growing up as a magazine junkie, as a mixed race girl.
You didn't see yourself
I
in
didn't
these
see
magazines,
that. I didn't
right?
see that. I saw it in like marginalized, magazines that were, for Black people, but you don't see it. You didn't see it integrated. And I didn't think I wanted to create a magazine that was reflective of the world that I live in and the conversations that I have with other women, which are varied. And it was just, and I think it's interesting, the timing, because we kind of all internally had this wake-up call together. And I remember calling this meeting like 2 years ago, and I've been at the brand for about 5 years, and just being like, are you guys bored? Like, how many times can we put designer fashion on a rich white girl blogger? And like I just can't read that, and I can't edit that anymore. And everyone was like, me too. And it was sort of this like revolution to go deeper. And it was really, frankly, pretty selfish because we were just bored. We wanted to like our jobs more and care more about what we were doing. And then we realized we created this community of readers who were really craving that authenticity and that intersectional point of view, and it started to work. And lo and behold, we became the Teen Vogue you know today. But I think being able to create a space where women don't have to choose, young women and young people don't have to choose a box to check, is so important in terms of the next generation being able to see the opportunities and the possibilities for themselves. So whether they are, reporting on the grounds during wars like you, or whether they, love fashion but feel like they have to whisper that because they want to be taken seriously as a journalist, hopefully they now can feel that there's space for them to be both or anything that they want to be, and all of it should be respected and upheld. And so I think hopefully Teen Vogue has helped create progress in that. And it just seems, for women though, it just seems like not even that, not a novel concept,
We don't just read fashion magazines,
Right.
we read newspapers, we watch news broadcasts,
Right.
right? Kids even do,
Correct. But for men, it's been kind of difficult for them to understand that. And I think it just speaks to how women are underestimated.
Yes, let me get to the next question about that. That is, and this may be my last question because I want you all to have a lot of time to ask questions. I've been wondering, at least in my work, I write about women and trauma and rape and violence against women and just all these terrible things that happen to women, but also women in leadership positions in parliaments and, really wonderful things about women. I once pitched a story to a major magazine. I was in Guatemala, and I had a really great story about continuance of rape after the 36-year civil war. And he replied to me, it sounds like a great story, but I can't publish it because last month we published a story on women in Honduras.
Check.
I mean, wow, right? So my question is, after everything you're saying and what you were ending with, how do we get men, not just male editors, but how do we get readers to understand that this is just, we're all part of this, that these issues that are so-called women's issues are humanity issues?
Yeah, maybe I can answer to this question with an anecdote. It was in May, of this year. There was a story published in Le Parisien, which is maybe one of the most popular French newspaper. And the story was about sexual harassment in one of the popular areas in Paris. The name is La Chapelle. It's the name of the area. And well, the picture depicted by the story was very, very negative. So sexual harassment in this area, and the picture which illustrated the article was a picture of men of color, so black men, Arabs, and only men like that. So that's what the picture, which was with the article, and the content of the article was like really bad, like some cafe and bars which are completely forbidden to women. That was what's written in the article. So wow, it was like a big debate in France when the article was published. And so we just decided to go further, and we made like our own investigate, and we just demonstrate and realize that the journalist who published the story was completely manipulated by a candidate for the legislative.
By what? I'm sorry.
A candidate. He was running for the legislative, and she was completely manipulated by him. And so just to answer to your question, we think that making people aware and being aware of this and being conscious of this, women and men together, our work and what we say in the Bondi blog is that we have to give the context of the stories, not only the facts. And when we made our investigate, when we published it, there was the fact that it's true that some women in this area were harassed, sexually harassed. This is true, this is a fact. But, well, the generalization and the stigmatization is like very, very dangerous because people made directly the link immigration equal sexual harassment with the pictures and with the content. And when we published our story, we said, okay, the statistics are completely clear, the facts are clear, but, well, this is a popular area with all the problems that are with this kind of area, like density, urban density, the infrastructures that are not adapted for it, a lack of infrastructures also, a lack of parks, the roads, the streets, and how would say trottoirs? Sidewalks. Sorry, sidewalks. Yeah, sidewalks which are not adapted for the area. I mean, all these things are linked with the topic. We cannot only put on the scene only the fact, because this is dangerous. And people do not know what is to live in this kind of popular area. We have to give them some information, some elements to have the wide landscape. So, yeah, I think it's one of the ways to make people be aware.
To contextualize, to really...
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Laura, I don't know if you want to address this, but we have a half an hour left. So if you do want to say something, please go ahead. Yes.
Oui.
Okay.
C'est très compliqué ces histoires-là, parce que ce que vous dites, effectivement, à propos de ce quartier de Paris, ça s'est passé en Allemagne, vous vous souvenez, à Cologne, le soir du 31 décembre, il y a maintenant 2 ans, où il y a eu des agressions de femmes lors de la fête du 31 décembre, et ces agressions étaient commises par des gens, des travailleurs immigrés. Et vous savez que c'est ce qui a fait basculer une partie de l'opinion allemande contre Angela Merkel et le discours d'accueil des immigrés. Donc c'est très, très compliqué. Je crois qu'en tant que journaliste, nous devons dire la vérité. Je crois, en ce qui concerne le viol et le harcèlement sexuel, comme nous disons en France, moi je n'ai qu'un espoir, c'est que la parole continue à se libérer. En France, aux États-Unis, je ne sais pas ce qui se passe, mais en France, il se passe une révolution de civilisation. Les femmes qui ont commencé à parler, je désapprouve « balance ton porc », parce que je pense que les hommes ne sont pas des porcs. Et heureusement, il y a beaucoup plus d'hommes non violeurs et d'hommes qui respectent les femmes que d'hommes qui ne les respectent pas. Mais il y a beaucoup aussi de femmes qui souffrent depuis des décennies ou depuis très peu de temps, et dire ce qui s'est passé, dire le saccage d'une vie, c'est très, très, très difficile. J'espère que l'actualité, nous qui sommes journalistes, nous savons qu'un événement chasse l'autre, on dit. Et tout d'un coup, l'histoire Weinstein va disparaître et l'histoire des femmes va disparaître aussi. Non, nous avons comme devoir, en tant que journalistes, que l'histoire du saccage des femmes, et de l'honneur et du courage des femmes qui prennent la parole au nom de nous toutes, pour que toutes les femmes puissent dire la vérité et que entre nous la solidarité continue, pour que nous puissions nous aider à nous protéger. Le mouvement ne fait que commencer. Je crois qu'il y a Caroline de Haas dans la salle. Il y aura une pétition dimanche prochain dans le grand journal français qui s'appelle le JDD, où des femmes appellent pour que le gouvernement français change de politique par rapport à cette révolution qui est en train de se passer pour nous les femmes. Et j'espère que ça va continuer.
As our heroic translator continues to write.
Well, I think it's a very complicated situation. What you just described in Paris, what happened in that Paris area, for example, also happened in Cologne, in Germany, 2 years ago, the night of the 31st of December. There was this aggression against some women by some immigrant workers, and when that happened, the way it was reported, well, it completely changed public opinion's attitude towards Angela Merkel's open approach towards immigration. And so it turned some people against this open approach. And I believe that as journalists, our duty is to tell the truth. So about these stories of rape and sexual harassment, I think it's fundamental for women to free themselves and to speak up. In France, at least, I don't know what the situation is like here, but in France, we really need a thorough revolution based on civilization. It's a civil revolution. Actually, a lot is happening. There's this movement with hashtag Balance ton port, which is the equivalent of the Me Too hashtag. And I don't necessarily agree with this, the way the French wording is, because it literally means expose the pig that attacked you. And I don't believe in the terminology because a lot of men are not pigs, and I don't believe in this way of describing that. However, what is true is that there are a lot of women who have been victims of rape or harassment, and they've been suffering for years and years, and speaking up is extremely difficult. So I think it is very important for us as journalists. Well, we know that in journalism, whenever there's a very quick news cycle, so whenever something new happens, well, old news become old news very quickly, and we don't want for that to happen for this. We really feel I feel it's our duty to continue speaking up for this. All these stories that women are now exposing, well, it requires a deep sense of honor and a lot of bravery, and these women that are finding the strength to do that are doing that in the name of us all, so that we all can feel free. And this movement is just at the beginning. I believe that Caroline de Haas is in this room with us tonight. Well, there's this this journalistic approach. There's a paper called JDD, which is at the forefront of this. And just next week, we're launching through this vehicle a formal appeal to the government so that the policies towards women can be radically changed. And I hope this is just the beginning and that this can continue with the same strength.
Nassira, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I totally share the point of view of Laure. For sure, I mean, our mission and our work is to tell the truth. But I think we have to tell the truth and give the elements and give the tools to people, to readers. Because sometimes when I just read, as a journalist, when I read like a dépêche, like, I don't know, how, a lead agency, I mean, a paper from agency like AFP or AP, yeah. I mean, it lacks some information. And we need, I think, the wide landscape, as I said just before. For instance, for the information of the refugees, of the immigrants that rape and sexually attempt to women in Germany. The problem is that we always just focus on these topics, but I mean these things just happen everywhere. everywhere. Like, for instance, in the festivals, in Norway, in Sweden, in Denmark, in Germany, in France, and there's no link with immigration. And we don't really give the focus to this kind of topic because it's not like sexy, you know, it's not like, so I just think that we have to be cautious as journalists and give the keys to people to understand that sometimes these kind of topics, these kind of stories are just instrumentalized by politicians. And yeah.
And if only you were living in this country right now, you would understand how fake news has taken over our lives. In fact, today I was listening to the idea that, you know, President Trump will only speak out when it's a terror attack by an Islamist extremist. You know, no white Christians who kill other Americans get any comment. I mean, it's just ongoing. The misinformation, the lack of acknowledgement. So I do want to move into questions from all of you. And there were a number of things we did not get to because these women are so brilliant and have so much to say that I didn't even get to ask half of the things. But here are some thoughts for you all. Not only the issue of fake news and how we're dealing with it in this country versus what's going on in France and whether they're dealing with this at all. Also to think about women entering the social media space and the harassment, and that journalists are very much part of this space. And then also, we didn't even touch on the fact that, you know, every single industry right now is facing this outpouring. Well, you did touch on the Me Too movement, but whether there will be any kind of reckoning. I'm sure you heard that the head editor of NPR News was just asked to resign after, you know, multiple accusations of harassment, and it's going from media company to media company, and I could sit here and tell you stories, but I will not do that at the moment. So I think someone's passing around a microphone. So that woman's had her hand up in the back in the red, so whenever the mic reaches you.
Yes, they can exchange that.
Bonjour, Sandra Muller. Une petite question pour Laure Adler que j'ai interviewée il y a quelques années quand vous étiez sur une radio publique. Je vois qu'en 2007, vous avez intenté un procès au responsable d'une association d'auditeurs de France Culture, Antoine Ubrina, pour un slogan vivre et penser comme des porcs. Là, il ne faudrait pas que vous fassiez trop d'amalgame. Est-ce que vous connaissez...
Excuse me, wait one second, the translator's trying
Sorry, I was dealing with something else. She sued an association for using the word pork at this time. And my question is, do you know the roots for Balance ton porc? Because you are a journalist first, do you know where does it come from exactly?
Oui, je sais très bien. Alors, je vais rappeler, comme le disait ma voisine, il faut toujours rappeler les contextes. Donc, je vais rappeler le contexte. J'ai été directrice d'une chaîne de radio qui s'appelle France Culture, qui appartient à Radio France. Dans ce cadre, pendant 7 ans et demi, j'étais harcelée sexuellement, quotidiennement, par des insultes et par des caricatures. Je n'ai pas souhaité porter plainte pendant les 7 années et demie. Quand j'ai donné ma démission de ce poste de directrice de France Culture, où j'ai subi un harcèlement sexuel quotidien, j'insiste, j'ai introduit une plainte contre la justice et je l'ai gagnée.
Okay.
Voilà.
Et vous connaissez l'origine de Balance ton porc du mot?
Oui, je vous ai vu à la télévision, oui, je vous connais, oui.
Vous savez que c'est Weinstein.
She's going to go ahead and translate.
Pardon? Qu'est-ce que vous venez d'ajouter là? J'ai pas bien entendu.
Ça vient du surnom qui a été donné au producteur.
Oui.
The Pig.
Oui, mais moi je pense que même si c'est le nom qui a été donné au producteur, je pense que les hommes ne sont pas tous des porcs. Ne vous en déplaise.
Il y a Balance ta truie justement.
Just a minute, because I think if you want that everybody understand what you say, we must let the time for the translator to translate. Thank you so much.
Yes, I know very well. And as my neighbor just said, you need to talk about context. And to speak about what happened to me, well, I was the director of a radio station called France Culture, and which was part of French radio. And I held that post for 7.5 years. Well, during my job for the entire duration, every single day I was sexually harassed with insults verbally, but also with caricatures. And throughout all the time I worked there, I never reported that to the police or officially. But finally, when I resigned, I did. And eventually, I actually won my case. So then the follow-up question was, well, do you know why the origin of the name Balance ton porc, which is, you know, expose your pig, and it was about this producer, Chiron, and that's the name, and Laure said that she was well aware of why.
Anyone else?
I have a question maybe for Elaine.
Yes, I can speak English, maybe. Yes, just to tell you that there is much more than 500,000 people who want to speak, that it's not a pork, you know, it's an expression, it's not the same thing that the situation you had before, absolutely not. And you have to know, as I said, we have a lot of men behind us, a lot, and there is no generalization. So when I hear that from France, that it's not a feminist party between men and women, because we have so many support, as you said, from men. That's all.
C'est une très bonne nouvelle et je vous en remercie beaucoup.
Very good news. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I had a question for Elaine, because you are in charge of Teen Vogue, and we hear or we read very often in feminist literature that, in fact, women become feminists later on. Like when they are young, they don't see the problem, and afterwards they are faced, you know, with the ceiling, the glass ceiling, and they face many problems, and then they realize and they become feminists. So how did you feel your readership? Are teens feminists?
Absolutely. Get ready for Generation Z. They are going to be so much bolder, so much, in some ways, savvier than any of us. And we're pretty amazing. We're pretty amazing, I would say, all of us in this room. All of
And how come?
I think you have to remember, this is a generation that grew up with, and I'm speaking specifically for American girls, with Obama as their president. We can't underestimate what that does to the psyche. When that is for us, we were celebrating this victory because it was such an anomaly. And for them, it was the norm. It's like, what do you mean? What do you mean a black man can't be president? So it's like, obviously a woman can be president. It almost created this slight complacency.
Obviously not.
Which is why we maybe needed to be, I mean, let's not try to even find a silver lining here, but I think the result of Trump, in sharp contrast to the Obama era, has woken these girls up in a way that can never be, like, you can never go back to that sense of seeing the world as, like, totally fair and post-race and equity, like everyone can experience this or taste equality. Like we're woken up from that. We realize that's not true. And also, how wonderful is it that these girls are growing up with, you know, hearing Chimamanda's feminist, you know, prose on stages with Beyonce, you know, like, and for whatever you think about Beyonce, whatever you think about how she portrays herself, the definition of feminism, of being a feminist, has expanded so much. Thank God, because before, I think even when I was growing up, it definitely was equated with man-hater. And now we're much clearer, we're more educated, that it just means you believe in equity for all. And so there's this sense of inclusion. There's like this idea that even with activism, like there's a sense of, there's a new inclusive definition for activism. There's a new inclusive, very rational definition for feminists. And so I don't think that they're growing up with the same hang-ups that we had from previous generations. And also, layer on top of that, this is the most informed generation ever, because they grew up with the internet as their third arm. Yeah. So everything is at the tip of their fingers, and we can't underestimate that either. So I'm hopeful about the future generations, and that's why I'm so energized by working at Teen Vogue and by interacting with young people all the time, because I get a glimpse of what the future holds, and it's so much better than this. You know, it gets better.
Just to be the voice of I just wanted to be the small voice of negativity, but I just worry about the generation that has only seen Trump as their president. What will happen after that? But, you know, hopefully it's 4 years and that's... They're also less. Yes, yes, they see the resistance. You're right.
There's no way to experience Trump in a vacuum.
True.
Yeah, no.
The question was not addressed to me, but maybe I can just answer in the French point of view. I mean, in the French personal point of view. Well, we don't have the same history for sure. We don't share the same history, but well, in France, girls, and it's like visible in the websites, internet, social medias, and so on. I mean, their models are Rihanna, Beyonce, and they are taking these influences to grow up. But now we have like a generation which comes to the scene, like Rokhaya Diallo, for instance, she's here, an activist and a journalist, and other women, like for instance Alice Diop, a filmmaker, or others, who are just making their own history with their own trajectories, immigration history, and how they are integrating in France, and how they are also taking influences from the United States. And I think that the Bondi blog, with our means, which are very, very like few, but with our means, we're making also a new generation of girls and boys who are just sending us emails and say, okay, I don't want to make an internship in Le Monde. I don't want to make an internship in Libération. I want to make an internship in Le Bondi blog. And for us, it's like a victory. Because when we have just only 12 years of existence, and actually when I just become a journalist, I just wanted to be like a war reporter, to go to Syria and to go to Iraq and so on. But now I'm very, very, very like happy in my job, and I know that we are giving opportunities to girls and boys to become journalists, and for them in their minds, I mean, it was like impossible to imagine or to imagine. So, yeah.
Oui, j'ai une question pour suivre ce qu'elle a dit, la femme pour Vogue. Et, in English? Okay. I feel very strongly that Vogue, Plum Sykes was always a mentor for me as a writer, a fashion writer, who also kind of posed these interesting articles. And I'm wondering if you can articulate to what the mission at Teen Vogue, or even larger, if Condé Nast is thinking about talking about some of the more difficult issues about the intersectionality of the feminist struggle with classism. Because I think the fashion world really touches on that the root of these issues of sexism often are defined by classism, and what is valued as desirable in class, in appearance, in being politically correct in speech and language, and what is being said. And I think Teen Vogue is in a unique position for young minds to be able to shape that even more as millennials. And I just wondered if, you know, featuring Kim Kardashian as a business leader is something you're thinking about, because it seems to me something unstated in sexism, class, and politics is anybody who had anything to do with the sex trade industry, whether it was a tape or some other part of her past, she's stigmatized. But if you look at it, she's a great business leader. And I just don't know if those are the type of things that you want to be talking about at Teen Vogue.
What part of that question should I... That was a big pie you just served. I'm figuring out where to take my first bite. So you addressed classism. You also addressed consumerism in some ways. In your perspective, Kim Kardashian is a role model for being a great business mind. Is that what you would? Is that fair to say? Okay. So, and then you're asking me, do I agree, and would I hold her up as a role model for young women?
I'm not asking you to agree as you or hold her up as a role model, but I think that the fact that her or other of her ilk that are doing things that are different from what is conceived of as a female business leader,
well, I think that's
are
why
not getting voice within the community. So,
I think Kim Kardashian has a big voice and a big stronghold on pop culture. I don't think she needs Teen Vogue, and I think it's wonderful actually that she to adopt your perspective. I think she's been represented that way on the cover of Forbes recently. And she's
really? Thank you for informing me.
Yeah, I didn't know either, and I would only know because I was actually on a panel and she was right after me, and I was like, "Oh, hey, Kim," and I saw her face posted on the cover. But I think it is important to show, you know, different models for success, and I think but is that Teen Vogue's message? Is Teen Vogue the platform for Kim Kardashian in terms of upholding her as a business leader? I don't think so. I don't think that's our message. I think it's important for us to look at, you know, what are the characteristics of a role model for this generation. Kim Kardashian, something we address a lot is privilege, and Kim Kardashian is the epitome of privileged. So for that, she was able to flip her privilege into more privilege is commendable, but not necessarily the gold standard for success, in my opinion, or a model for success, or a replicable model for people who aren't born into privilege that way. So I would much rather look at, you know, we have a franchise called 21 Under 21 that recognizes young girls and femmes who are changing the world from their corner of it in their communities. And I think too often those are the girls that they aren't getting the representation, they aren't getting the covers, they aren't getting the space in mainstream media to share what they're doing in small ways that when you look at it collectively is actually making big impact. And I think while there is, you know, Forbes can cover Kim Kardashian, I'd like to cover, you know, the young girls that need the platform probably more than she does. And so that's my perspective, and it's definitely, there's space for both.
Yeah, it was more, and I don't mean to just use that as one example, I was more interested in understanding how you thought about your position at Teen Vogue, and thank you for the work you're doing, as being able to, what I see Vogue under the leadership of Anna Wintour and Condé Nast has this really interesting bridge potential of bonding these worlds of, you know, consumerism and politics, and they do that well in their, you know, adult publications. I didn't know, I wanted to hear more about your mission vis-a-vis, I mean, because I think it's important for young minds, especially teenagers, to be thinking about these things in an era where we can have these global conversations.
I'm just going to ask you to keep it a little briefer because we have so many people waiting. Thank you.
That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Me. Thank you. I'm nervous, not American, not French, but
what are you?
Get out. I'm Kiwi. I'm from New Zealand. But I'm just wondering, in terms of you talking about Generation Z, sort of post-feminist, post-gender, post-sexuality, it's very awesome, but also in terms of basic consent, like what is the next accessible, like classless, non-academic way forward that doesn't rely on the victim survivor to come forward in terms of allegations of sexual harassment?
I'm confused by the question. Are you?
Sorry.
Can you clarify?
I'm just very nervous, and so yeah. Okay.
Try one more time.
I'm just wondering, like, how, like, you're all strong women of your fields, and I'm just curious as to what you feel is like the next step in terms of addressing, like, the Harvey Weinstein saga and all the people that have come forward since then that doesn't rely on the victims or survivors to be the ones that actually have to make the first move forward. So like more of a collective, societal, not for the women, not for the queer men, not for whoever has been victim to it, but for the community to actually take responsibility and move up.
Can I just address this quickly? So in my years, I worked at the Committee to Protect Journalists as a senior editor, and I did a large report on sexual violence and journalists, so rape mostly of women who are journalists all around the world, not just foreign correspondents. And the stories of harassment I heard were, 4 or 5 times the number of rape stories I heard, but I didn't put them into this report because it was really about the extreme violence. And a lot of it was about how newsrooms react. And I called a lot of editors and I informed them of like a case that, I couldn't get into details that had happened a few years ago, what would you do now? And they were all kind of like, huh. Like as if they just never thought about it. They had no idea how to address this among their reporters, among their editors, among their photo editors, how to kind of speak with women and men about how to even behave properly when working together. So since all this has happened, and I'm very connected in this community of women journalists who deal with this issue, there are talks that I'm not going to make public now about certain initiatives that are starting up that will kind of look at how do we handle this at higher levels, how do we get these editors on board, and how do we change the kind of thinking in these newsrooms. So that's just one small piece of it.
But I also think it starts with educating young people about rape culture and the insidious but less extreme cases of sexism. It starts there. And then there's a sliding scale and a very slippery slope. And we do a lot of education around rape culture, and we call it that. We want people to get comfortable thinking about that and being able to call it out when they see it. And to your point, so wonderful that you pointed out that we have to shift the narrative away from this like victim versus the pig, because no one's going to identify as a pig or a victim. They don't see themselves in those.
Can I just say, though, I just, in the language I use, because I write so much about rape, I use survivor, because that's what most people choose when they are not dead.
Sure.
So that's just one way to kind of give a little more power back to the person.
Yeah, but at Teen Vogue, we involve boys in the conversation. So there's one video series that Teen Vogue did that actually won an award that was called Guys Read. And you have boys sitting together, looking at each other, looking at the camera, reading personal stories of sexual assault written by girls. And so it takes a minute to realize what you're hearing, and there's a disconnect between the masculine, strong bro that you're looking at, but the story that he's telling, and you can see him connecting with the words as they're coming out and really empathizing and really putting himself in that position, and that's powerful. And this is less about, from a media professional standpoint and more from just a observer of culture and just, being an American right now. I've had more conversations with men about sexual assault than in the last few months than I have probably in my life with strangers. I was on a plane with a man just recently, and he said, I don't understand who these men are. I must know them. How do I know these? I mean, if you look at the incidents of sexual assault at work or sexual harassment at work, there's just no way I don't know these men. And I have nothing but female friends at work, and they're all, I've been friends with them and I work with them for decades, and they've never told me that they've experienced this until now. And so I think there's this really important paradigm shift for men they're now looking at each other differently, looking at themselves in the mirror differently, thinking, remembering interactions that they've had that may have been inappropriate and they didn't even know it. So I just think that the fact that we're starting these conversations and that it is reaching men, it's like raising everyone's collective consciousness at the same time. And I think it's just so important. It's so incredibly important.
Just to add super quickly, there's an article that's out in the New York Times, I believe, today about men and rape, and just how this one study that was done, how men who actually are rapists can, call this number and talk to this researcher, and basically none of them considered what they'd done rape, even though all of them admitted to forcibly penetrating a woman against her will. So it's very interesting, the conception of what men think is appropriate, not appropriate, and if you take it back down to harassment, you know, I just wonder how many of these men just are very unaware of the way they talk to us, of the way they touch us, of the way they think about us. Did you want to add? Yes.
Maybe I can add something. I think it's not a question only of these extreme cases that are very like impressive, rape and harassment, but this is about banal and daily domination of boys and women on men, of men on women and on girls, and it's like the daily life of millions and millions of girls in the world. Like you are going just to school and you have like this humiliating kick name and you don't dare to raise your hand because you know that all the boys are just gazing at you. So I think that the education is necessary above all for those things, because for the extreme cases, I mean, the justice and the medias, I think that they are going to make that job for sure. But for those banal and daily things that are very like vicious, you know, very deep, it takes time. And for this, I think, yeah, education is completely necessary.
We have time for the briefest question and the briefest answer, and that right there, you look extremely enthusiastic, so just keep it quick.
This is a very impressive panel, and I'm very happy to hear about consciousness raising. Now my question is, how do you raise consciousness? How do you change women's attitude in such a way that they do not appear as prey on the street? Or to put it another way, raising consciousness and educating seems for you to appeal to the mind, to the attitudes, to the opinions. My sense, and in my experience, it's not simply something that happens in the mind, it's something that happens in the body, or in the way a body presents itself, or in the way a body walks on a street, in the way you address someone or you answer someone. And it also has to do with fashion. There are two types of fashion. There is fashion for women, which empowers them, and there's fashion for women that makes them look more frail or more easily preyed upon.
That's an opinion.
So I think that, and maybe I want your opinion on that. Don't you think that one way to start with, if we're talking about raising consciousness, it could be, with martial arts. Get women to do martial arts.
I feel like we've just opened up another 2-hour discussion, so...
it's the way the body presents itself.
Agreed, and this is a major discussion, and it's been going on for decades and centuries. Does anyone want to briefly say something?
En tout cas, merci beaucoup pour cette intervention. En tout cas, ça me rappelle les débuts du féminisme en France, donc ça veut dire que le féminisme renaît aussi et qu'il est de plus en plus puissant, parce que c'était une question très importante à la naissance du féminisme français. Il y avait même des femmes qui disaient qu'il fallait plus s'épiler les jambes. Voilà, et qu'il fallait surtout pas être sexy. Voilà.
Well, thank you for what you said. Actually, it reminds me of what was happening at the start of the feminist movement in France. So to me, this is a sign that it is a new birth, and it is something that becomes more and more present. So in the early days of feminism, some women were saying that they shouldn't even shave their legs anymore because of what the implications are. So to me, it's a good sign.
Okay, thank you. I'm so sorry we're out of time. Please thank our panelists who have been amazing. And I want to thank each of you and our translator, our heroic translator. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lauren. Thank you to the panelists. You did a great job. So tomorrow we'll have a conversation with Roxane Gay, Camille Morino, and Mona Chollet about the body. So you're welcome. And Laure will be signing both. Thank you.